Thank you for joining today's webinar. We'll just give it a minute or two and let everyone join the session. Thanks very much for being on time. Hope everyone's having a fantastic Thursday afternoon. All right, so let's kick things off. So this webinar is called How ApprovalMax Helped This Not-for-Profit Reduce Paper-Based Tasks by 70%. So in today's webinar, we're going to be diving into the real-world impact that ApprovalMax can have as we explore the transformative journey of Coast and Country Community Services, a not-for-profit organization that successfully reduced its paper-based processes by around 70% using ApprovalMax. So whether you're part of a not-for-profit or business experiencing similar challenges, or maybe you're part of an accounting or bookkeeping firm that's helping your business clients, hopefully this session is going to give you a clearer picture of how you can use software like ApprovalMax to strengthen your financial controls and reduce the manual work within the accounts payable side of the business, ultimately freeing up the team to focus on the work that truly matters. So just a few housekeeping points before we get started. So our webinar today is going to run for about 45 minutes in total. We'd love to hear from you as well, so please feel free to participate in the polls and in the Q&A sessions as we move through the slides. If you do need to step away, don't worry, we'll be sending out a recording of today's session within the next 24 hours, so you won't miss a thing. And we really hope you find today's session both valuable and engaging. Now, let's get started with some introductions. So to introduce myself to start with, my name is James Lynn. I'm the APAC lead here at ApprovalMax. So I've had the pleasure of working with businesses and accounting firms for close to a decade now, helping them streamline their processes and achieve greater efficiency through technology. Now, we're also joined here by Brendan Lucas, who is head of accounting here at ApprovalMax and also runs his own accounting firm. Brendan, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. So I lead Next Dimension Accounting, which has a team of accountants and bookkeepers that works with primarily non-for-profits and also business clients in providing an outsourced accounting team to manage the day-to-day accounting, as well as providing that on-demand CFO service. And then in my other role, I'm also, as James alluded to, head of accounting at ApprovalMax, which basically means coming from that sort of practice experience, providing some support to ApprovalMax of what's happening on the ground and what we need and what we like, as well as helping at events like this to promote to others the benefits that ApprovalMax can have to your accounting firm.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. And we've also got James Gould, who's the CEO of Coast and Country Community Services as well, who will be sharing his story today. So James, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's James Gould. I'm the CEO of Coast and Country Community Services. We're sort of a small to mid-sized community transport and community service provider across southern New South Wales. So I was brought into the business, into the industry about 3 years ago, having come from the NDIS, which went through a fair amount of transition and transformation. And the aged care, community aged care space is going through that same transition now. So I was brought in to help foster the organization through that challenge. And so ApprovalMax is a big part of that.
Fantastic. It's great to have you both joining us today. All right. So let's kick things off with a quick poll. So now you know a little bit more about us and who we are and our backgrounds, but we'd love to get to know a little bit more about you guys, specifically what kind of challenges you're experiencing in your firm, right? If you're working with paper-based manual tasks, which of these core challenges are resonating the most with you? Is it the storage and accessibility costs, time restraints, compliance and audit concerns, or risk of human error? All right, so we'll give it a minute or two to let everyone have a chance to vote. James, from your perspective, what was the biggest challenge for you guys back in the day?
Look, to be honest, it's everything. It's all kind of it's all a big issue. I think time restraints is always a major issue, primarily because of cost. When you're working for a charity, you don't have a lot of resources to be thrown around. Therefore, you're always under the pump just because you don't have enough team to actually get the job done.
Hmm. All right, I'm not sure if I can see. Okay, yep, it's popped up. So fantastic. We've got a real mixed bag of results here. Brendan, any thoughts from you on these results? Does that line up with what you're expecting as well?
Well, it's interesting. James said all of them, and that's basically what the votes have come back at. Look, I think it's yeah. I think there's the other ones I can add in there is probably just the knowledge around it and actually understanding what's actually available, and that there is actually better ways of doing things. But look, I think definitely for different organisations, with all the things that I talk to clients about trying to make things better, they're the sort of those issues come up time and time again. Particularly as James said, time restraints is typically a big one for non-profits, just because they're often running on the smell of an oily rag, but not by choice.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that sometimes it's not about it's about not knowing what's out there, but sometimes knowing what's out there is a challenge as well, because you look on the zero app marketplace. I think what are they up to, like 1,000 different apps that do all sorts of things. So that's a challenge in itself, right? Is like finding the app that works best for your organization.
So true.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time to answer that poll. It's very good to get those insights. So before we dive deeper, I'd like to take a moment to just share a bit of background on ApprovalMax and what some of our customers are experiencing. So ApprovalMax has been around since 2016. And in that time, we've been fortunate enough to work with a wide range of businesses, from small organizations all the way up to large enterprises, all looking to streamline their approval processes. So we've received over 350 five-star reviews on the Xero App Store, and that really speaks to the positive impact that ApprovalMax has had on our users. So they very much highlight that ApprovalMax has made the day-to-day operations much easier, more efficient, and really allowing businesses to move away from those manual paper-based processes and embrace a more streamlined digital approach. Awesome. So that's enough from me. Let's move into some questions about the team. So James, maybe you can share a bit more about your organization and some of the specific challenges that you faced and the journey that you've had over the last few years.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, Coast and Country Community Services, we're primarily a community transport provider looking to diversify into different fields, NDIS, social support, things of that nature. Where turnover's around about 4.5 million, but we're a volunteer-led organization. So what that means is that we're probably big. Our footprint is larger than that 4.5 million turnover would imply. We've got about 160 volunteers, around about 40 paid staff. And with about 10,000 clients. One of the key things is we're spread across a portion of southern New South Wales. So we have offices that run down from the Shoalhaven and Kiama, down the coast all the way to Bega at the Victorian border. And then we stretch out over to the hilltops with Young and Weddingshire as well. So a really big territory with a lot of volunteers and relatively large staff. We're a community transport provider as well, so we're a direct care remote worker provider. So the issue with that is that we, like all direct care remote care providers, we have very little sort of oversight of our staff. It makes managing staff quite difficult. It makes risk management quite difficult. We're also quite a traditional industry as well. So a lot of our volunteers are old age pensioners, they're retirees, they're looking to come on board. They're maybe not as computer savvy. That's definitely changing, but there's still a demographic that, they're not as computer savvy basically as a 20-year-old would be. So that's something we really need to bear in mind. Because we're spread over quite a wide geographical area, communication, coordination is very, very difficult. the staff as well are coming from a certain demographic. We're a traditional industry, basically. We're a community-focused community service provider. Most community transports, they grew out of very small community services. So basically, essentially, somebody would get a grant from a local council, a group of citizens would get a grant from a local council, and they would buy one vehicle. And then they would run that one vehicle, very little regulation, very, very low cost, entirely volunteer-led. And that was basically the service. So as we've gone over the last 20 years, we've professionalized. We've slowly sort of moved into this sort of semi-quasi-professional space where we have paid staff, but we have the legacy of being this very, very traditional volunteer base. And also the demographic is generally towards the older in terms of our staff. So it's not the demographic that is pushing innovation and change. And we are a traditional organization, and we've remained very traditional in terms of practices and processes. And that's partly because of funding. You know, Brendan mentioned the smell of an oily rag. Well, the oily rag wasn't there. It was just the smell, basically. It was left over from the funding model. So everything that we do is, we're trying to professionalize. We're trying to become a different industry, but we're trying to do it on the same money that they were doing with the volunteers. So it was kind of like living a champagne lifestyle on a beer budget, basically, and that makes things extremely challenging. For a lot of different reasons, including those, we've never basically moved into digital transformation. We didn't have the skill set, we didn't have the money, we didn't really have the people who were able to do that. So everything was entirely paper-based. And by paper-based, I literally mean stacks and stacks of paper. Everything was manual. And, bear in mind, we're dealing with volunteer drivers, sort of in that bracket of 60 to 75. Who are out on the road, so they need that paper, they need that level of comfort. And in the office where we were computerized and we were digitized, it was very much paper replacement. We'd never moved on to anything like cloud-based systems or any automated processes or any kind of sort of sophisticated scheduling software or things like that. What that meant was that all of our processes were highly, highly manual. Every time you want to do something, you have to go and get a bit of paper. You have to take that paper, transfer it to somebody else has to sign off on it. When I arrived in the organization 3 years ago, there was an approval process for our fleet. So we're a transport company. So you can imagine the amount of approval there is for fleet maintenance. It's constant. So we'd have to have a piece of paper would have to be generated and written, and then it would move across 5 different desks, and it would get 5 signatures, and then it would end up on the CEO's desk, and then it would get signed off. And the noise of the paper was audible. Basically, you could hear the flapping and the wafting of the paper as it came through. So quite different to the environment that I come from, working for an NDIS provider, and that's essentially just the way it was. So coupled with the fact that we're geographically diverse across a really wide area, each of our outlets is around about 3.5 hours away from the other outlet. So you can imagine the challenges of communicating documents across these wide distances. And as we grew into a larger organization, so the Department of Transportation has sort of pushed us to become larger for economies of scale, but that's also created challenges, because if you're growing in scale and you're growing in distance, well, okay, so how are you going to do that with a paper-based system? So that's something that was never really thought through when we were pushed to grow and change. Now, essentially what that meant was that we had this system which was very time consuming, very manual, very, very difficult, and we weren't getting more efficient as we got bigger. We were actually getting slower, and and the feedback from the volunteers, from the staff, from the clients was like, oh, well, you were better when you were ... 20 years ago you were this small little provider, everything was better then, the service was better, things were quicker, I could get responses. And coming as a CEO, that's the last thing you want to hear. Oh, it was better when it was all volunteers. I've got a lot riding on the fact that I can make things better. I mean, like my mortgage and my pay packet to start with. So that's concerning to me. Now, in terms of that process, we obviously started using digital tools, but those digital tools such as email and scanning and things like that, you can imagine how they would be quite cumbersome even then. You can imagine every time you need to take a bit of paper, you go and scan it in. You have to scan it, fold it, send it off, email it to somebody. That email gets lost. You have to chase that email up. You have to phone them up. The picture sort of tells itself. So running a relatively large community transport provider across a wide geographical area with either entirely paper-based or paper replacement digital systems, it was extremely difficult, to the point where it was interfering with efficiency, with customer service, and therefore ultimately with our profit. So essentially, something had to be done. That situation couldn't carry on as it was, because the truth is, all the changes that we'd made to grow and professionalize and diversify, they'd actually taken us backwards. We'd actually got slower and less efficient and producing better quality outcomes for the clients. Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're about. We're a charity. We're here for the community and the public good. And we were actually creating poorer outcomes for the clients, which necessitated a massive change in the way we do our business.
Yeah, fantastic. It's thanks for sharing that information. It's one of the challenges of growth, isn't it? When you grow, there are numerous issues and challenges that do pop up, and you need to do that in a way that's, it's scalable, but it's also risk-free. And, it sounds like a part of the organization that isn't working, that affects the entire organization as a whole, right? The customer service, the experiences of your customers as well. Brendan, how did you get involved with James and helping his organization?
So I actually started talking to Coast and Country a number of years ago, because we work with a number of community transport organisations, so we're sort of well known in the sector. We spoke to the previous CEO, had a bit of a chat. I came in, and this is pre-COVID, and I was still horrified at the amount of paper and some of those processes that James touched on. So we had some ideas of how we could make things better. Then I think they continued doing what they were doing. And then the joys of a newsletter, a mailing list. Luckily, the mailing list was the auto forwarding still to James's mailbox, and he got it one day, and then we touched base and went from there. And look, and we started talking about what we looked at before, what's possible, some of James' frustrations. And the interesting part is, part of someone's being in that non-profit sector and change management, not even at a staff level, but at a board level, it still probably took us, James, 6 to 12 months to actually be ready to hit the big button, which wasn't even that big, which was a big button for everyone else, but we knew it was quite a simple button to press, to actually start putting some of these changes in place.
Yeah,
it was there's a long drawn out process. Yeah.
And was there any was there anything that like broke the straw on the camel's back that made you think, look, I definitely need to get this moving. We need to digitize our processes. Like, this can't continue?
I don't think there was one critical point. It was a case of I was brought into the organization. So the previous CEO, he was there for quite a long period of time. He left, and then, like all sort of large changes in leadership, it sort of led to a triggering of new ideas, and what are we going to do about this? So it was me coming into the organization, looking at the processes, seeing how maybe entrench some of these ideas were, maybe how committed to the paper-based way of doing things some of the employees were. And I suppose, you can't see the wood for the trees. So coming into an environment where people were really struggling, and I don't think they understood that they were struggling, because that's just how they were doing. They just thought this is the way the work is. The thing about charities is we're here for the good of the community, and the staff take that on, basically. So there's almost a sense of, if you're not struggling, you're not really doing the work properly. And coming from quite a different background, the answer is no. We're here to do good, but we're not here to struggle and have a hard time. There are better ways of doing things, and that led to the conversation with Brendan, which I'd actually forgotten about, the fact that the whole thing was triggered by an email from a mailing list. So that was a lucky find.
And it's interesting when you talk about some of the non-profit employees. I've even found with business employees, there still sometimes is that concern with some staff going, we better keep doing it this way, because if we put something in to make it faster, well, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to be at risk. But there's obviously, and we've come on and helped, and the person doing the bookkeeping for is still very much part of Coast and Country, and offering different support now to the business, because they've now got the time to look at the numbers in a different way and help keep the information flow happening, where before they were just sort of struggling to just stay afloat. So I think, you know, there often is a thing of, you know, if we've got 5 hours, we've got to use the 5 hours, where it's hang on, if we could do this in 1 hour or 30 minutes, imagine what else we could do for the benefit of the business or the non-for-profit if we had some spare time to actually stop and think and use the knowledge we know elsewhere. So I think that's often underestimated, the benefit of that internal capability you've already got within an organization.
We've got a question coming through from an attendee. I think it's quite topical. How did you manage to change staff habits to still love email approval or paper and train so many people? I think it's a very good question, because change management is such a difficult thing to manage, right? And people, they get, you know, wedded to the way things are and the way things are currently. How did you guys manage that process? What did that look like for you?
I snapped my fingers and it worked. So fairly straightforward. No, you know, yeah, it's extremely difficult. Like I said before, a lot of it's a block funded environment, and so, you know, there's a certain way of doing things. People are very wedded to these manual paper-based systems, and it's sort of something Brendan just alluded to. There's an actual fear of things becoming easier, and I think it's two separate reasons. One, people are definitely worried about losing their jobs, absolutely, and that's a valid fear. But also, I think people think that if you don't have to work hard for something, then then it doesn't work. They're concerned. There's this fear that, oh, well, you know, so you click a button on an app and it fires off into the cloud and does all the approvals. That doesn't feel real. Whereas if you've gone and found a bit of paper and you've had to, you know, like work it out and scrabble through, that feels like real work. And so there's a psychological component there. So there's real genuine fear. I mean, I'll tell you for a fact that we've now gone through this whole digital transformation, and we still have as much work as we had before. This is what I try to explain to the staff: is it's not about getting rid of jobs. It never was. We're actually looking to increase. We're doing this so we can scale and grow. If we don't increase the efficiency of our systems, we'll never be able to scale. If we can't scale, I can't provide more work. So we've actually got more work now than we ever did. In terms of change management, it's extremely difficult. I think that we've done a really good job. Looking back, there's a lot we could do differently. But what always surprises me is that if you do the work, how willing people are to get on board. So there has to be tough conversations. You have to sit down and you have to place expectations on the staff and have those performance management and have those performance reviews and person-centered planning sessions, and work with people and convince them that what's happening is in their interest and get them on board. But there's also the flip side of it, which is some people will never get on board, and you have to have those very difficult conversations. And those conversations are, this is the way we're going. There is a place for you, but only if you're coming on board. So it's really, really challenging, but absolutely always surprised by how well people respond. In fact, I was just having a conversation today about a team member who we've been, struggling with for quite a while. The transition's been really hard for her on a number of different areas, and she's actually got herself involved in a customer service project team that we operate. And I wouldn't have thought that she would be interested in that. I wouldn't have thought she would excel at that, but she's absolutely smashing it, and she's found her niche. You know what I mean? And I think, unless we did this process, she would have never realized that was her passion. That's what she was interested in. So this really opens it up for people to actually get away from the admin work and the drudgery, and actually do some really, really creative, interesting work.
And I think, James, for me, from what I could see from afar more, was you're the visionary, goes, hey, we could do this better. Let's go. Here's the solution. And then getting your management team involved. So our team, there's multiple staff that are actually talking to other staff within Coast and Country. Not everything's going via James. So therefore, there's other relationships to help in that change management piece. And I think the bit, from what I understand, is benefited your team is you've been able to give some of your staff who deserve some responsibility and accountability running their areas and parts of the organization the ability to do so, which the paper-based system didn't give them that same ability. Everything was sort of centralized at finance, and then eventually you would see it. So I think there's a lot of positives you can still sell in sort of making changes like this. And I think you just got to work out what they are, so to empower your staff, and then making sure you sell it as you sell those advantages. Acknowledge the difficulty in change, but also what some of those positives will be for them.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and it's feedback I've heard before, where introducing technology to streamline those really manual processes that, to be honest, people don't really enjoy doing that type of work, right? And if you kind of free them up to be able to do higher value work and things that are more in line with their interests, and they're getting more out of coming to work every single day, that's a net positive for the organization, and that improves like your staff retention and employee morale as well.
Yeah, there's fear of that higher value work, though. That's really important to recognize, because if we're talking about change management, if you say that to certain people, and you say, okay, we can produce this more creative, higher value work, some people really jump on that because they understand what you're saying. But some people have never been given the opportunity to do that type of work, and that is actually one of the real sticking points. So yeah, it's about, you know, look, there's no way getting around it. There's no substitute for hard work. You just got to get in there, do the work, have the conversations. But yeah, really convince people that actually what we're doing is opening it up to support people, to allow them to get away from the work, which you're absolutely right. Most people don't really like grinding through emails and paper and things like that. They do it because it's within their comfort zone. So it's about saying that actually pushing outside your comfort zone. Yes, you know, it's scary. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but ultimately you're going to find it really rewarding.
Going back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier about choosing the right app for your business, I mean, there's so many different apps out there, and each of them does maybe the same thing, but a little bit differently. What was the process that you went through in terms of deciding on a tool, testing it out, implementing it for your organization?
So
Look, in terms, sorry, go on, Brendan. Okay, I was just going to say, so in terms of Next Dimension, one of the real benefits for us was Next Dimension and ApprovalMax. Next Dimension sort of walked us through the process, so they provided a curated suite of products. So for us, it was very, very straightforward. But just in terms of, so I come from an operational background, and I'm running, you know, quite an operational organization. Really, what we want is something that works. You know, there might be 10 products that do the right thing. Ultimately, we just want something that works, and we're not too fussed about the specifics of it. It's just a tool that does the job.
And that's basically the way that we sold it to James. So previously they were on MyOb. So part of our pitch was, look, we can take over the accounting. We can bring in this tech stack to optimize and make things more efficient. And, you know, we'll set a monthly fee. We'll cover everything, our costs, softwaring. So you've just got one fee to solve it. And again, to James' point, as long as we could show him that the product was worthwhile, and we weren't like a guinea pig of some new potentially, you know, whiz-bang system, which often they're more promises than substance. We were basically good to go. So we'd already done our homework. We've been building this service, you know, over a number of years, and had the stories from other clients of how this works. So that made it really easy for us. And you know, it's a very every client we deal with has bills to pay. So obviously it's quite an easy tech stack of going right, Xero, ApprovalMax, and then however you want to get the bills into the accounting system. And there's a very simple tech stack, which will work for every client, whether they've got employees, volunteers, or whatever. And that's sort of our basic. And we just go, look, if you want to work with us, this is how we do it. And these are the benefits. Like I still remember when we actually took over, you might not well remember as well as I did, James, but I think when we got on board, we, yep, we're good to go. Yeah, we've done the numbers up to whatever month it was. Yeah, cool. And we went, no, you haven't. You're about 2 or 3 months behind that. Oh, are we? Oh, yeah, we are a bit further behind. All right. So the fact that we had paper-based systems meant James couldn't rely on monthly reports with enough accuracy to make good decisions. So now all of a sudden we've got that transparency. Things are moving you know, at pace as far as from an approval process, what it used to be. That all of a sudden, you know, the benefit is, yes, the bill is approved digitally, and that's wonderful. There's no paper. But the reality is we can now have a month-end meeting in a appropriate time after month-end, talk about it, make decisions before it's too late. You know, if something is going wrong, let's solve it. Which I think, from what I've seen as well, has helped for James to provide his board more confidence in what James is doing, because when your finance system is lagging, you don't have that data to provide to show, hey, this is how we're traveling. So I think that's made a big difference from what I've seen as well, which, you know, if you're in a position of leadership, you need to make sure who you're reporting to has confidence in what you're doing, and you need to back that up with numbers. A story only works for so long. And so I think that's where it's just those basics of systems and processes, and be able to provide a P&L and a forecast for the current month based on real data, without the, oh, we might be missing some things. I don't know, fuel comes in next month or next week. Like, that doesn't cut it when you start growing to multiple sites, and, you know, we're up to, you know, 40 plus employees at the moment.
It really speeds up the decision making, doesn't it? So rather than having to wait weeks or month before a month end to be able to get the right data and then make a decision off the back of that to improve the business, it speeds that decision making process up. So like you said, you can do the reporting and the forecasting and start improving the business much faster, and that has a compounding effect over time.
And with block funding, you know, which basically, for those on a not-for-profit world, basically means you get the same amount of funding every month or every quarter for a certain amount of service delivery. You need to be on top of your expenses so that you can hit budget and stay within your means at the end of the year. And so hence getting this data in real time is super critical. And to me, the same discipline applies to businesses. Yeah, I'm in business. I want to know where I'm at time. I don't want to get surprises of bills, you know, they're sitting on someone's desk from 2 weeks ago, let alone a month ago. So, yeah, there's a lot of benefits to just having very good processes. And what we're talking about here, again, is something very simple, which used to work very well when they were small. We'd have a paper system, but now we're bigger. We've got multiple locations. Yeah, it's just, yeah, hence some of the feedback I think James mentioned is that it was better before, because, you know, the systems just hadn't kept, and processes hadn't kept up with the maturity of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of ApprovalMax as well. So, you know, it takes me as long to read a bill and sign off on it on paper as it does to click on ApprovalMax and tick that button and approve it. It's basically exactly the same amount of time. The difference is, when it was paper-based, I'd have to go and, you know, knock on the bookkeeper's door and ask for the bill, because, you know, maybe he'd left it in the stack, or, you know, maybe as it was, you know, underneath something on my desk, so I'd have to find it, and then I'd have to think about it, or I'd have to go and grab the correct person who was supposed to be. I'd have to ask somebody, you know, you've spent, you know, $2,000 here, like, what's going on? So that's the process. And then what would happen is, because that might take me 5-10 minutes, or it might take one of my team 5-10 minutes just to do the job, because, you know, say it's like, you know, 4:30, they go, oh, I'll do it in the morning, you know, because they push it back, and then the morning comes around, and then they forget about it, and they're really, really busy, and then that gets pushed for another day, and then maybe they lose the bill. And that happens all the time. You know, it happens more often than it doesn't, to be honest. And I'm sure, you know, everyone's familiar with that process. Whereas with something like ApprovalMax, you know, run by Next Dimension in the background, I know exactly where it is because it's in my email. So basically, it pops up on my screen, and I go click, and then it brings it up, and I go click, and the bill goes to the correct person. So I don't have to chase. You know, if it's not for me, it's for somebody else. It goes to that person. They have to do that process. So I'm not chasing anyone down. So that's where the efficiency comes in. It's the fact that if I've got, you know, 5 minutes before the end of the day, I know I can knock all this stuff out. So rather than leave it, I will actually get it done and approve it there and then. And the same goes for all my staff. So the efficiency that it lends, you really can't sort of oversell just how much quicker it speeds everything up. And I suppose it's not even speed, it's mental effort and energy, you know, because often when you got these paper-based systems, you end up doing things 2 or 3 times, you know, because you lose something, you do it again, you have to have multiple conversations with people, and it's just always something going on in your head, and that actually just detracts you away from just the work that you're supposed to be doing. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. We spend most of our time actually doing things that we're not here to do. We're a direct care service provider. That's really what we should be doing. We should be out there looking after people. Most of our time isn't doing that. Most of our time is making sure that mechanics get paid and things like that.
I think the word I think of, James, is consistency. So when you set up a system like ApprovalMax and you set the rules up, it consistently follows those rules every time. And that's something you can then rely on, which is not, you don't get the same benefit in a paper-based manual system, because humans have bad days. That's just reality. We're inconsistent as much as we try to be consistent. It's just not possible.
Yeah, it's an
I mean, in
interesting.
terms of, oh, sorry, I
I
was
was
just in terms of consistency. When you've got, sorry about that, when you've got people coming through, you've got new employees who are coming through and they don't know the system. When you've got a paper-based system, you have to explain it to them, and we have quite a complicated process, and it just takes forever, and they don't get it, and they make mistakes. Whereas with someone like ApprovalMax, what happens is the email just turns up in their inbox, and that's it. And so you don't even really have to explain things; it just happens, and they do it.
I was going to say it's an interesting point about the mental load, because we get that feedback all the time where we're talking to them and they're saying, look, these are the rules, like if it's from this department or if it's this amount, it has to go to that particular person. And we ask, where are these rules kept? Like, is it written down somewhere? And it's like, oh, it's all in this person's head. You know what I mean? And it's like, imagine the mental load that requires for them. And what if they go on leave? What happens in that case?
Yeah, and I think if there's one tip for anyone out today, even if you decide to stay with paper-based systems, at least write down and save somewhere whatever those rules are in someone's head, because that's what you should have as a minimum. You can't be running an organisation with those sort of things not documented. And then once you've got it documented, ApprovalMax becomes a very simple implementation process.
So with not-for-profits, compliance and audit is a big thing. What was that like in your organization before ApprovalMax, and how has that changed post ApprovalMax?
And look, in terms of the audit process, obviously that's handled by the accountants. But again, look, it was just very, very heavily paper-based. Basically, the auditor would come. We would have stacks of folders, like lever arch binders, and the bookkeeper would go and would spend a few days, pulling out these lever arch binders. But it required somebody to manage this stuff throughout the entire year, basically, because because paper doesn't just naturally slot itself in a file, somebody has to go and they have to store it and put it in a lever arch file. They have to remember where it is and record where it is, and then they have to go and find that and then provide that to the auditors. So in terms of that, the auditing process has got extremely simple. I mean, how could it not? Basically, it's a very, very streamlined process now compared to what it used to be.
And I think the big additions I see across, for Coast and for other clients is by the audit trail getting attached into Xero as the extra attachment. The auditors can see that straight away. They can look at the workflow rules. There's now more tracking in the system in regards when those rules have changed. So you've got some better transparency around that. The other thing is you've got the likes of Coast and Country based in regional New South Wales. I'm here in Sydney. I can work with James and his team, and our team can work remotely, and we've got access to everything. And effectively, the audit's the same. So I think the auditors still came on site for this year, but realistically, they could do it remotely around the accounts payable at least next year. It also maybe opens up the door for them to look for auditors outside your local region if you wanted to. So it just gives you that choice where if you're paper-based, you're either going to get a local audit firm or you're going to pay money for someone to travel to come and see you because they can't run their audit remotely. And I think that's just, again, just having that choice, I think is really important. And it's, it's just an added bonus of implementing a system like this.
Just in terms of that internal audit trail, as a CEO, look, I'm on the hook basically for everything, especially financial, actions in the organization. And I'm very proud of this organization, and we have really good people. I'm not particularly concerned about people doing the wrong thing. What I am concerned about is mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. People lose documents, and people, do things that they didn't realize they were doing wrong, and then you don't find out till a year later. And when you've got a paper-based system, there's no evidence to cover it. So I then have to walk into a board meeting and say, yeah, this happened. I don't know why it happened. And that's an awful place to be. Whereas pretty much now, if something happens, I can go, okay, yeah, so a mistake happened. This person did it at 3:30 on this particular day. I've spoken to them. That triggered their memory and they remembered. And it turns out it was actually just a genuine mistake. We've put training in place. That's a much easier position to argue from rather than, I don't know,
Yeah. And, we'd love to live in a perfect world where nefarious things and bad actors, that type of thing doesn't happen. But unfortunately, it does, right? And the number of scams and fraud is certainly increasing. I think I saw a stat from Zero, where 1 in 5 small businesses are victims of fraud. And the amount on average is around $20,000, which can be, a massive hit to these organizations. So it's something to consider as well. Sometimes these things happen and you got to protect yourself.
Agreed.
And I'd say with that, the truth is, I think when you have paper-based systems, and this is coming from the organization I work for and a number of organizations for the last sort of 15 years, when you have those cash-based, paper-based systems, you generally don't know. People are stealing from you, and you've got no idea that you're taking it. It just ends up at the end of the year, one of your budgets is slightly more, and it's not a good position to be in.
I think I even saw on the news, like Facebook or Google was defrauded by fake invoices being sent to the organization as well. So it's not just small or medium enterprises that are a victim of this. It can be a massive issue if it's not systemized, if there's not systems in place checking and making sure that things are above board.
Well, we're protected from that kind of fraud because we don't have 160 million to just give away without any kind of evidence. So
absolutely,
we're lucky.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Now you mentioned a 70% increase in efficiency, and that's kind of the title of today's webinar. What exactly does that look like for your organization? Is that in terms of time saving or money, or how does that work?
It's across the board. I mean, at the end of the day, as it's time savings are money savings. So you're either saving it in terms of actual dollars and cents, or you're saving in terms of freeing the staff up to go and do other things that are going to be generating that revenue. But I think realistically, ApprovalMax, because we moved on quite a significant digital transformation across the whole organization, and some things have gone better than others. Most things have gone okay. We've had some real challenges with other things. ApprovalMax and some of the other processes that Brendan's brought in with Next Dimension, touch wood. It's never a good thing to say, but they pretty much work flawlessly. They do what they said on the tin. A service was promised and a service was delivered. Now that might sound small praise, but coming from someone who runs a relatively complex care environment, that's everything to me. Really, I just want things that work and are safe and do the job correctly. So in terms of what ApprovalMax has done in terms of efficiencies, basically it's transformed the organization from being incredibly paper-based, incredibly heavily manual in our processes, and it's almost entirely automated all of our financial processes in a really effective way. And I was saying this to Brendan the other day. I recently came back from holiday, and normally when I come back from holiday, there's a massive stack of paper on my desk that I have to go through and read and sign and go through. I came back a few weeks ago, nothing. The desk was clean. No one had been in my office, and that's an incredibly difficult thing for me. And you talk about that mental overload. Again, that's the thing, because you get back from holiday, the first thing you got to do is to go through all this paperwork. And what's worse about it is, I know there's no point in me doing it, because the money's already been spent. I'm wasting my, I've got a lot of things to do. I've got emails to chase up on. I've got team members to catch up with. Instead, I'm sitting there wading through a sea of paperwork. And the net result of wading through that sea of paperwork is nothing. It's just a waste of my time. So in terms of the 70%, it's really tricky to say exactly, where the efficiencies are, but it's 100% true that it has transformed the organization and the way we do business. And I think more than even that, there was a question before about how we manage change management. Well, one of the ways you manage change management is you give them wins. You give them results. You say that actually, I'm not just somebody coming in to change things because I want to pick myself up, or I'm looking for to impress the board. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm trying to make your life better, everyone's life better. And this, is, even though finance is a relatively sort of niche part of a much larger organization, the impact and the flow on of streamlining everybody's workflow, it really can't be sort of overstated.
So I think we could continue this conversation for hours on end, but I think we're reaching the end of our time available today. Before we kind of move on, Brendan, any final thoughts from yourself? Any insights or advice to businesses or accounting firms around what we've been discussing today?
Look, I think from listening to James, from when I first met him, and then even some of the recaps to today, is just when you haven't got good systems and processes in place, no matter what part of the organisation relates to, it really does put a handbrake on what the organisation is capable of achieving. So I think if you are advising businesses, non-for-profits, and you can help take that, relieve that handbrake, that's a massive win for your client. And then likewise, if you're in a leadership position, you've got the same opportunity. And I think sometimes we look for, the big win and look for something nice and shiny and it's going to, look good. But sometimes it's simply just fixing, back of house and those basic tasks, making that simple, so the focus can then be on the things that you're supposed to be doing. So it's amazing difference that just having electronic approvals of bills, that positive ripple effect across the organisation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, so we've got a final poll to share with you guys. If we could just pull that up on screen. Basically, if you're interested to learn more about ApprovalMax, if what's been discussed today is resonating with you and you'd like to learn, is this something that could potentially support our business as well? We would love to connect with you. So we've got a poll that should be coming up very, very soon. Yep, fantastic. Are you interested in learning more about ApprovalMax? If you want to get in touch with our team, just put yes there and we'll be in touch with you. We've got a friendly team ready to help you and understand more about your business, your requirements, what are the challenges that you're facing as well, and we can provide a tailored solution for you. Just to share as well, we've talked a little bit about this, but ApprovalMax is not just for paper processes. So a lot of organizations, they move ahead with email approvals to try to digitize things, but email, it's not a perfect system either. There's a lot of manual work required in terms of chasing people up, in terms of having bills missed in invoices, etc. So look, if that's something you're experiencing, we can certainly help with that as well.
Yeah, I've had many clients' bills intercepted via email servers and things change. So yeah, definitely recommend staying away from email.
One thing that pops up is what if someone goes on leave, right? Then the bills pile up in their inbox and they're off on holiday somewhere.
Yes, which in ApprovalMax is much easier. Flick of a button, I'm going on holidays next week and all the bills will go to someone else to approve, which is great. Or if I wanted to, I could approve them while I'm on holidays, but I won't be doing that.
Yeah, that's right. All right, we'll give it another minute. Let everyone give a chance to respond. All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone. I really appreciate your time and attention today. We'll spend the next 5 minutes or so. If you got any final questions that you would like to ask that we haven't covered today, please feel free to shoot those through in the Q&A section, and Brendan, James, and myself can go ahead and answer those for you.
I think we might have one question there now, James, just talking about system features within ApprovalMax. I'll just read it out. So I wish to understand more specifically on the system features and changes in an organisation's processes to overcome manual processes, resistance from older volunteers, involvement in management level, etc. I guess I'll touch a little bit on what I see from ApprovalMax benefit, and then James might better throw in a little bit of wisdom. My take is ApprovalMax itself, the setup is quite straightforward, and typically that's by someone who's more sort of has got the buy-in of the system. Once you set up your rules, it is as simple as getting an email, clicking a button, looking at the bill and going, do I want to approve that or not? The same choice you would have made if it was paper. And that now you get more information, it's a little bit easier, like tracking to budgets and stuff. So I find when you're looking at something like this, it is a very simple system. And so therefore it's relatively easy to teach someone. It's then just a matter around that basic change management of why this is better than the way we did it. And I think that's where I might leave to James just to give his thoughts there.
Yeah, so coming from an operational level, it really is simple. I think what Brendan just sort of touched on there was the simplicity of it. And we're a volunteer organization. We're an organization, you know, of so a lot of individuals without necessarily that great tech skills. But just across the board, any organization, no matter how sort of complex you are or how qualified the staff are, simplicity is always best. And in terms of what we were able to achieve with ApprovalMax is basically we've got one entry point into it. We have an invoices email address where everything, it's invoices, receipts, remittances, basically everything that we enter into the financial system goes to this email address, and it then gets filtered through into ApprovalMax. That then gets put into the approval process, and that's sent to the correct person. So it's quite complicated, or it's sort of moderately complicated on the back end, and there's a lot of sort of nuance to it. But in terms of when you're using it, basically, you scan something in on your phone or with an email, send it through to an email address, and then you get a notification on your phone or in your emails, and you open up something to look at, and then you press approve or decline. That's basically it. You know, it's about as simple as you can possibly get. And we've done a lot of work simplifying our processes, and ApprovalMax fits very neatly into that. So if you're talking about change management, bringing an organization on board with some of these processes and digital transformation, which is really scary, having very, very simple, straightforward processes that actually work, that's the key. Because the last thing that people want to see is you bring on a process and, oh, it's amazing, it's whiz bang, and it doesn't work, and then it's garbage. And especially, you know, the older demographic, the older volunteers, when they experience issues with technology, their instinct is not to work through it. Their instinct is to say, oh, it doesn't work. You know, you've replaced something that worked fine with something that doesn't work, therefore garbage. But you would be surprised about how willing people are to adopt new systems if you make them very, very simple and very, very, very straightforward. And then what we actually find is that people turn around after there's an initial level of sort of fear and concern about the fact they're being asked to use an app or something, you know, scary, like, you know, new, you know, like cloud-based technology sounds like, you know, as something complicated and difficult. But once you go to them, oh no, you just send this through, and then, you know, every now and again you might get something on your phone and you press like that. The response, they turn around and go, oh, well, that's simple. Why didn't we do this 2 years ago? And you're like, okay. You know what I mean? So you do find very much that. I mean, to be honest, you know, we're talking about it. That's the key thing. That's when you know that you've really hit the nail on the head, because the people who are fighting you tooth and nail, they turn around and they start complaining at you because you should have done this sooner. You know, and that's actually happened a lot. But it's about that hard work, and it's about having the right systems, and about making them very, very simple.
It's tough to please everyone, isn't it? Any other questions, team? Last chance. If not, feel free to get in touch with us if you do think of any questions going forward. We're always happy to answer those for you. But otherwise, if you're interested in exploring more, we do have a 14-day free trial, which you can access on our website, ApprovalMax.com. This will give you full functionality of the platform, so you can import your organizations, start inviting users, start setting up workflows and testing everything out. Completely free, no credit card required. And as I mentioned, you get full access to the system, and our friendly team will be on hand to help. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time and attention, everyone. I hope that was an insightful and helpful session for you all. And massive thanks to Brendan and James for sharing your insights and expertise as well. Cheers, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.